I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. Campaign 2012 will be here before you know it. Will Catholics support President Obama like they did in 2008? We'll ask an expert. Plus, reading, writing, and dragon training. It's all in a day's work for local Catholic school kids.
Not only are they getting the message of the films that we're showing, but they're also getting the message of service to help others, to help the underdog, to help the person who needs our assistance.
And the road ahead in Egypt through the eyes of a Christian leader. Well, good evening and thanks so much for joining us tonight. The first major candidate to officially throw his hat into the ring for the 2012 presidential race is none other than President Obama. Earlier this week, the president released an ad in which he let his supporters do the talking. CNN's Nicole Collins has the details.
The 2012 presidential election begins with this.
Here it is, 2012, the election.
A video posted on BarackObama.com in which President Obama does not appear, and an email from him to his supporters that reads, "As my administration and folks across the country fight to protect the progress we've made and make more, we also need to begin mobilizing for 2012, long before the time comes for me to begin campaigning in earnest." The president's early start on his bid for re-election is a move Democrats hope will allow him to reach the unprecedented fundraising goal of $1 billion. The Republican National Committee issued its own web ad in response to the president's announcement.
We need jobs. We need leadership. Yet you do nothing as we pile up debts we can't afford.
A sentiment echoed by Republicans on Capitol Hill amid an ongoing contentious budget battle.
You see the president really, MIA. And you see him planning his announcement for his re-election bid. It's just kind of like, where are your priorities? And this has to be the nation's #1 priority at this point, because the debt is a national security problem.
No Republicans have officially announced a bid for the White House, but several have made a steady stream of appearances in key early voting states.
And that, of course, is CNN's Nicole Collins. And there is a lot that could happen, of course, between now and November of next year. To talk about that and much more, we're joined now by John Heyer. He's the executive director of the Catholic Citizens Committee right here in Brooklyn. John, thanks so much for being back.
Thank you, Matt. Wonderful.
Appreciate it very much. Now, as we were talking a little bit before going on air here, one of the questions that we kind of were raising was a little bit about the timing of this announcement. That's something that Republicans in that piece that we just saw were talking about, the timing of this announcement with all of the budget negotiations going on and so forth. What do you make of the timing of the president's announcement?
Well, to be honest with you, if we could have waited a week, or if he could have waited a week, I think it would have been better. Waiting till we had a budget, waiting till we saw exactly what was going to happen. It seems like a bit of a tumultuous time to really be making such an announcement. Sure. We have the Republicans and the Democrats that are debating over the budget. Do we cut $61 billion? Do we cut $33 billion? And a lot of this comes right down to the pockets of the electorate, of the people that are going to be voting for the next president. And that's where people vote from most, often.
Sure, voting with the pocketbook. And in 2008, about 54% of Catholics voted for President Obama. Knowing what we know now, and of course this is kind of peering into the crystal ball a little bit, but knowing what we know now, do you think that trend might repeat itself in 2012?
There's a lot of things that's going to depend on. First of all, it'll depend on who Obama is running against, obviously. But even with that being said, we could take a look at a couple of the different initiatives that the president began his election with, 3 years ago, really, and see where he's at now. One, for instance, is the Defense of Marriage Act, which he stood behind, not forcefully, but he stood behind the first time around. And now, just recently, he has said that his administration is no longer defending that Defense of Marriage Act. Sure. So that's one thing that Catholics are thinking about. We could also take a look and see what happens in this budget negotiation about whether or not funding is kept in the budget for the possibility of Planned Parenthood as well as, abortion possibilities. Sure. So we'll see where that goes as well on those issues. Other than that, I believe Catholics vote just like everyone else. And again, they vote on the economy, on their state, on their ability to, raise a family where they want to and find a job. And the way things are going right now, we really haven't seen much great progress you know, down on our blue-collar level, if you want to call it, in the last couple of years.
Right, right. And that was actually kind of going to be one of my next questions there is do Catholics, you know, kind of follow that trend of voting with the pocketbook as opposed to voting on some of these social and moral issues. So you think that they do kind of follow along that trend more so than not? Because I think the Catholic electorate, and you know this more than anybody else, I think, the Catholic electorate is kind of hard to pin down in any given election because I think the Catholic Church itself, some of the issues fall on one side aligned with one political party and some aligned with the other. So it really makes it really hard to kind of pin down.
You know, as Catholics, we really follow our theology, and that is that we believe in free will. And the church believes in free will. And so the church, what it does is it lays the moral guideline, let's say, or creates a rubric for what it thinks Catholics should, you know, follow when making electoral choices such as this. And it's up to the electorate, up to the individual Catholic to really weigh their options, their pros and cons. But it is true, Catholics have elected, you know, all of our recent presidents. Majority of Catholics wind up voting for the winner. Does that say more about our Catholic doctrine and teaching, or does it just talk more about Catholics and how they feel things relate to them, and how they feel the separation between government and their faith, which unfortunately is something that we hear from the secular side quite often, separation of church and state. But, you know, to be someone of faith means that faith, I would think, permeates every decision that they make in their life.
Sure. So you wouldn't maybe want to make a prediction for 2012 this far ahead.
Well, all I know is that they just did a recent poll, and in Iowa, the top 4 Republican choices are Mitt Romney, Mike Huckabee, Donald Trump, and then Newt Gingrich in that order.
Got one Catholic in there.
So yeah, so all I could say is I'm not sure what's going to happen, but it'll be very interesting.
It will be. There'll be some great moments in sports come between now and 2012. I mean, it's going to be very, very interesting race to watch. John Heier, thanks so much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Well, stay tuned. There's much more currents ahead. Pope Benedict calling for calm in Libya and the Ivory Coast. We'll tell you what he had to say, and we'll have the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, an Egyptian cardinal works to build bridges with Muslims in his country. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Pope Benedict says he's praying for the victims of violence in Libya and the Ivory Coast. In his weekly general audience today, he called for an end to fighting in the two troubled nations.
La violenza e l'odio sono sempre una sconfitta. Per questo rivolgo un nuovo e accorato appello a tutte le parti in causa affinché si avvii l'opera di pacificazione e di dialogo e si evitino ulteriori spargimenti di sangue.
Now, the Pope also said the special envoy he sent to the Ivory Coast has been blocked from entering the country, but the pontiff said he hoped that situation will change soon. Meanwhile, Catholic aid organization Caritas International is calling for an investigation into the violence in one Ivory Coast city that has left hundreds of people either dead or missing. Today, opposition forces stormed the home of President Laurent Gbagbo, who has refused to leave office after losing the election last year. Meantime, now in Libya, the head of the Catholic Church there says in order to find a solution to the unrest, both sides of the dispute need to be heard. The Apostolic Vicar of Tripoli tells the Vatican news agency Fides that both sides have committed wrongs. He also said that Turkey has taken a good position in attempting to negotiate an early ceasefire. Well, the brother of slain Pakistani cabinet official Shahbaz Bhatti says he forgives his brother's killers. Bhatti, a Catholic, was Pakistan's first and only Christian government minister. Gunmen shot and killed Bhatti in his car while he was on his way to work last month. His brother, Paul Bhatti, says he and his family forgave his brother's assassins because, quote, "Our faith teaches us to do this." In related news, a report from Pakistan says someone of the Hindu faith may replace Bhatti as Minister of Religious Minorities. Well, New York Congressman Peter King's Washington office was reportedly at the receiving end of an unwelcome gift recently. A package addressed to King contained a bloody pig's foot and a note that contained anti-Semitic references. CNN reports that neither King nor his aides saw the package, as all mail sent to the U.S. Capitol is screened before being delivered. Now, while no official connection has been made, King, who is Catholic, held highly controversial hearings last month to examine radicalization in Muslim communities in the U.S. In Italy, the trial of Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi got underway today. Berlusconi is charged with having underage sex with a teenage belly dancer who goes by the stage name Ruby the Heart Stealer, and abusing his power by using his office to get the young lady out of jail. Berlusconi says the accusations are false. He did not appear in court today. The court session lasted only 10 minutes. It was adjourned until May 31st. Earlier this year, the president of the Italian Bishops' Conference accused Berlusconi of setting a bad example for young people. Well, the Bishop of Manchester, New Hampshire, says he will meet with the politician who called him a pedophile pimp. New Hampshire House Majority Leader DJ Betancourt lobbed the insult at Bishop John McCormick on his Facebook page. The attack came after McCormick spoke at a rally last week in opposition to proposed state budget cuts. Betancourt apologized for the tone of his remarks, but said they were made in reference to the sexual abuse scandal in the church and McCormick's role in it. McCormick was at one time in charge of investigation of abuse allegations in the Archdiocese of Boston, where the scandal first broke in 2002. A spokesman for the Diocese of Manchester called the comments false and defamatory and said it detracts from the real issue. Well, meanwhile, the bishop of the only Catholic diocese in Maine has reached out to victims of sexual abuse. Reporter Chris Rose has that story.
Bishop Richard Malone told the gathering inside the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception that Mass is usually a joyous thanksgiving to God, but today it was different.
There is a somber tone to what gathers us here.
What brought people together here was a remembrance of the victims of clergy abuse and the pain and suffering they've had to endure. The bishop offered an apology on behalf of the Church of Maine, and he urged those still suffering in silence to come forward.
Please, I implore them, I implore you, if you're listening to me now, to come forward for the healing and the justice that you deserve.
The bishop says he is willing to meet with victims, hear their stories, and offer them help to heal. He says he has learned from victims he has already spoken with that it is often a long, difficult road towards healing, and many have still not reached that stage.
They would tell me, I'll always know I was a victim, but I'm not quite yet a survivor. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work.
This annual Mass is a part of that healing process, a process that will likely continue for years to come.
The bishop has told us in meetings that he believes a generation has to go through and go by, and we cannot stop talking about this issue for as long as there is anyone who is hurt.
That report from Chris Rose. Well, state legislators in Alabama appear to be taking a page from their Arizona counterparts' book. Alabama's State House has passed immigration legislation similar to the one signed into law in Arizona last year. The bill gives police the right to question people about their immigration status if they believe the person is in the U.S. illegally. The measure also requires businesses to check the status of new employees. The bill now heads to Alabama's Senate. The U.S. Bishops' Conference criticized the Arizona law as draconian. And a new report from the Centers for Disease Control showing teen pregnancy has now dropped to an all-time low. Around 419,000 teenage girls gave birth in 2009. That's a 37% drop from 1991. The number is still 9 times higher than most other developed nations. Now, in related news, the Associated Press is reporting that Bristol Palin, the daughter of former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin, made more than $262,000 in 2009 for her work raising awareness about teen pregnancy. Bristol Palin first made headlines back in 2008 when it was announced that she was pregnant only a month before her 18th birthday. Well, stay tuned. There's much more currents ahead. When we return, local Catholic school students learn how to train a dragon. No, really. We'll explain.
In the film, there are times when different characters are in dire need of a friend or of help, and that's what was going on, with the kids. They're helping their neighbors.
Welcome back. Well, when I was a young whippersnapper in school, oh so long ago, The only time we watched a movie in class was when we had a substitute teacher. That was just about it. And even then, it was usually some boring documentary or another film that a teenager is not interested at all in watching. But earlier this week, some local Catholic students took some time out from class to head out to Douglaston and watch a popular animated film. How to Train Your Dragon opened last year to rave reviews. It made over $217 million at the box office. It drew praise for its positive message and fun animation style, and the Brooklyn Diocese Office of Faith Formation decided to screen the movie for Catholic school students at the Immaculate Conception Center on Tuesday. The admission charge? Well, kids had to bring school supplies that would go to the group Teachers of Light and then be given out to students in need. We sent our cameras to check it out.
One of the most important things that we can do is really give young people and adults the opportunity not just to hear in an instructional sense the gospel or the teaching of the church, but rather give them an opportunity to live the gospel.
Today's event is a film event, and what we do is we have the young people come to Douglaston Seminary and they watch a movie, and the admission price is a donation.
Their way of getting into the film today was to bring some form of school supply that will benefit the poor schools and religious education programs in the diocese.
There are actually kids that don't have folders to put their papers in. Meanwhile, my kids have folders for every single class.
It's sad because they can't afford such simple stuff for school supplies, and education is so important.
It should just be fair that everybody could have what everyone else has. We have to learn to share and give to other people.
Some of them just brought some index cards. Some of them just brought some construction paper.
Knowing that they're helping out kids their own age, I think that that's something that's really important to them.
It makes me very happy to know that someone who's going to school is helping someone who needs to go to school. I get to help these kids, and they get these things that we have.
There's something tangible that they're giving over that they know that someone's going to use.
So it's really faith in action.
It's a movie that I picked because I think it has a good message. The message is acceptance. And I was hoping that that message would correlate to the kids.
To help others, to help the underdog, to help the person who needs our assistance. That's precisely what they did.
I really liked the movie. It was fun. It was really good.
I think it has a good lesson, and I think that they're enjoying it.
We need new methods. We need to evangelize the culture. And I think an event like today helps young people to appreciate their culture in a new way, to look at it through the prism of the gospel. If we told them they were coming to hear a 2-hour lecture on, physics, I don't think they'd be too excited. But to come and see a movie and realize that their faith can be explored by way of that movie, I think it's something that's an effective tool. And that's the type of evangelization that we're trying to engage in the office.
A popular, fun movie as a teaching tool. Why didn't my substitute teachers ever think of that when I was in school? Stay tuned, there's much more Currents coming up. Coming up, amid revolution, a Catholic leader in Egypt is trying to bridge the country's religious divide. And finally tonight, before the apocalyptic destruction in Japan, before the pre-election demonstrations in Haiti, and before the union protests that spread like wildfire across this country, there was Egypt. And Egypt's peaceful protests played out on nearly every channel and covered the front page of every major newspaper around the world. The People Power Revolution, led by Muslims and Christians alike, was a mainstay of our news diet until their goal was achieved. That was the ouster of then President Hosni Mubarak. And since then, the unprecedented unity between Christians and Muslims is mostly a memory to most, but a cardinal in the newly liberated country wants to continue to build the bridges between Muslims and Christians that began with a common yearning for freedom. Rome Reports has that story.
Though it has been several months since the riots in Egypt that left more than 800 dead and 5,000 injured, the country remains in flux. It has been a revolution experienced firsthand by Cardinal Antonios Naguib, the Patriarch of Alexandria of the Copts.
It
was a movement coming from the people, especially from young people.
There were also Christians. They'd hoped to achieve the objective of this peaceful revolution, that is, building a state, a civil and democratic society based on the fundamentals of law and government.
He says that, to date, the change was not done democratically, but was based on religious grounds.
During the first 2 weeks of this movement, the unity between Christians and Muslims was 100%. An end to religious-based conflicts was expected, but changing attitudes cannot happen as quickly or as easily as the change of a system of government.
A few weeks before the riots, religious tensions were on the increase with the attack on the Coptic Church of Alexandria on December 31st. Therefore, the Pope called on the governments of the Middle East to protect religious minorities. This was largely misinterpreted by the local media and prompted Egypt to withdraw its ambassador to the Holy See.
On Al Jazeera television, they said that the Holy Father asked foreign governments to protect religious minorities in our country. This was false. Based on those statements, other media have attacked the position of the Holy Father without reading what he said, without even reference to the texts. Therefore, Al-Azhar said that the relationship with the Holy See was broken.
The University of Al-Azhar is one of the main Muslim partners in dialogue with the Catholic Church. Cardinal Antonios Naguib regrets that dialogue has not resumed, despite the fact that each side now has a clear position.
I don't understand why. I sent 2 delegations to the president of Al-Azhar. The first was comprised of my 2 auxiliary bishops and the head of the Catholic Communications Office. They showed him the text of the Pope and they explained it. The director just said, well, we'll see. That same day, the Greek Melkite Patriarch met with the Minister of Religious Endowments, who's the second in command of Al-Azhar. He showed him the text of the Pope and he explained, but nothing has changed. It might be a political decision, but politics and the regime have changed.
Such a position makes difficult good relations and interfaith dialogue between the 2 major religious communities of Egypt.
Difficult indeed, and what a year for news it has been already. With all that's happened since then, it's kind of easy to forget all of the struggles and really just the major developments that happened in Egypt not all that long ago. But you know, we kind of need to keep in mind all that's happened there and remember the situation as they continue to struggle in putting together a new government, and one that hopefully will be fair to all people regardless of religious affiliation. Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. Now, we all know we have to love our neighbor, but can we learn to love the law? We'll have that report coming up tomorrow. Until then, though, be sure to check us out online at currentsny.net. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter. Now, if you have a question, maybe a comment or story idea, send us an email. Our address is dropusaline@currentsny.net. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.